Alright, so why do we need to know left and right? Well, we're going to talk about abdominal pelvic quadrants. So quad means four, right? So we have our upper quadrants and we have our lower quadrants, and you just combine that with left and right. So this is the left upper quadrant, and this is the left lower quadrant, and then right upper and right lower correspondingly. So again, this is about your patient's anatomy, not about your view. It's all about your patient, right? So 4 means quad, right? So in quad, you have a quad, you're riding on a quad vehicle, a quad ATV, it has 4 wheels. So this quadrants and regions, they're referring to the abdominal areas, but there are 4 quadrants and 9 regions. So they're not interchangeable. Quadrants aren't the same as regions. They overlap, but they're not the same. Now there are 9 regions right here, so draw a tic-tac-toe grid right here, and you have the navel, the umbilicus, the belly button over here, the pico. So this is what we have here. Now the 9 regions, what are they? So what we have here? Well, where does the umbilical cord attach to? So we all had an umbilical cord at one point, but when we detach it, now we have our umbilicus, our navel, our pico. So this is our umbilical region. So the umbilical region, that's the center of that tic-tac-toe grid. Now let's go over here. So here is the stomach, and a root word for the stomach commonly used in medical terminology is the gastro or gastric. So what we have here is the epigastric region, and epi, so it doesn't mean as in epic, but whenever you see that prefix epi, it typically means above or outer. So what we have here is that we have the gastro part, and then we have so gastro refers to the stomach, or gastronomy. So that also refers to like the just eating food, right? So here we have epigastric, so kind of like above and outer to the stomach, and hypogastric. So this is or sometimes it's called the pubic region. The same region, depending on textbook. Know that hypogastric and pubic are synonymous. They mean the same region. So hypo is actually another common prefix you see in anatomy and physiology and medical terminology. That means low or below or under. So you might be wondering, well, why don't we just put the hypogastric region right here? So this is the way I memorize it. So this is already occupied by your umbilical region, right? So they put the hypogastric, this is already occupied by umbilical region. So hypogastric actually refers to this region, the lowest of the center, but the most lowest and inferior. Actually, we'll get to inferior in a bit. Alright, so over here, so in the upper left and right corners of the tic-tac-toe grid, we have something called the hypochondriac region. So this is different when you say someone's always going to the doctor because they're thinking they might be sick all the time. That's a different type of hypochondriac. What this is referring to is this. So this is your rib cage, and this light colored part is what is actually made of cartilage. And hypo, again, we're reusing that same term. It means low, below, or under. Now chondro, whenever you see that used in medical terminology, that refers to cartilage. So this cartilage, what it's referring to, this hypochondriac region, doesn't mean that you're always getting sick in those areas. It means that this is below the cartilage. I know that's the best that we can do with that, but let's just accept it. So the ribs are kind of in this area, and this is why it's the hypochondriac region. Now over this part, so in the left and right middle parts of this tic-tac-toe, this is so notice that it's around the level of your lower back. So think about it this way. This is a lumberjack, right? And lumberjacks, in order to chop wood, they need very, very strong cores and very, very strong lumbar regions. So I like to think of it this way. This is the left and right lumbar regions. So you need a strong lower back and strong core to be a lumberjack. So these are the left and right lumbar regions respectively. Now over here, so the bottom corners of the tic-tac-toe grid. So what are these? And this is an interesting medical term. So there's something that runs along here called the Inguinal Canal. So this is the left and right inguinal region. And inguinal, if you haven't had any anatomy and physiology before, this is probably a new term for you. So whenever I have when I'm learning new terms, often I like to use silly mnemonics because why? It helps me relate it to something I already know. So this is my mnemonic that I was when I was first learning anatomy and physiology. I like to think of it this way. So here we have your pet iguanas. And iguanas, they're reptiles, they're cold-blooded, and they like to keep warm. So say your pet iguanas are very cold, what can you do? Put them near your inguinal region, warm them up. So I like to think of it, inguinal iguanas right here along this growing line right here. So again, so now we have our 9 regions. So all of these, I do expect you to know all the quadrants and all the regions, and this is what we have here. So again, 4 quadrants and 9 regions. And why are they important to know? Because what if a patient says, oh, my stomach or my abdomen hurts, and you're like, oh, okay. So when he says abdomen or she says abdomen, what do they mean? Well, this can be anywhere over here, right? But what if you want to, you're examining them, you find where the pain is. Are you going to say he has a pain, he or she or they have a pain in their abdomen? Well, it's like, is the pain here? Is the pain here? Is the pain here? Is the pain here? And it can be in different locations. So this is why it's important to know your regions, because what happens if you look below the surface? This is where you have all your abdominal organs. And so this is where you have here, different organs are located in different regions and different quadrants. And this is why it's important to know these regions. Because say someone says like, oh, I have a pain, and can you describe or locate where the pain is? And they say like, it's kind of toward my right side and kind of like toward my lower area. So what's in the right lower quadrant? Well, you see the large intestines, you see the small intestines as well. So you probably think, yeah, it's most likely to be an intestinal problem rather than if it was a stomach problem or a liver problem or something with the heart or lungs. So this is how allows you to kind of think, okay, what's in that area and what could be causing that pain? Or if they say, I have a pain, but it's kind of central and all the way like down toward my groin area, and it's like, okay, it's probably not the bones over here if it's kind of central. Hey, maybe it could be something wrong with something infecting their bladder over here or the reproductive organs. So this is why it's important to know the regions and anatomy, because if you're able to kind of like pinpoint where the pain is, you can kind of deduce and say like, okay, these are the likely culprits that are causing the pain. So this is why it's important to know that. It's not just something that we're just making up names for regions. And not only is it important to communicate, but when you're writing it down as well, because again, you can say abdominal pain, but which is better to say, just abdominal pain, or whether it's the like general, or if it's able to pinpoint it to a certain point, it's better to be as specific as possible, because again, it helps you kind of figure out what's going on. Alright, so on that topic, root words, prefixes, and suffixes. And this is one of the initially challenging parts when you're first learning anatomy and physiology or anything involved with medicine. So many medical terms use Latin and Greek root words, and this is why it's often different from our everyday use. Do we speak Latin and Greek and everything? I mean, there's influence in the English language, but it's not always there. So why does it pay off to learn these root words like I talked about earlier, like hypo, epi, and hyper? Well, they make it easier to learn new medical terms because these root words appear over and over and over again. So sometimes if you have a big enough vocabulary of these root words, you can actually see a new word and somehow break it down into parts and kind of make an educated guess at what that new word means. So we already covered some like hypo and epi. These appear multiple times in the semester and throughout medical terminology.